This is day 9 of recording a video every day for the next 30 days. Today we're not talking about Claude or OpenAI. We're talking no AI today. Today we're talking about data privacy and how your phone or electronic device can be searched at the US border without a warrant, without suspicion, or really any reason needed. This applies to the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, which is abbreviated CBP. They have the jurisdiction, and now recently, as of July, like mid-July, have case law protecting them from doing these basic searches without a warrant, without suspicion, without reason, really. I went ahead and read this directive that was actually published back in January, but didn't really get solidified until this month when case law kind of backed it up in this appeal decision. So I read the actual memo and the directive, so you don't have to, and we're going to kind of go through it at a very high level and try to speedrun it because it is pretty dense. So let me go ahead and share my screen here, and I'll get off camera. All right, so this is the actual directive. This is the memo published on their website, essentially pointing to the directive. The directive, if you're very curious about numbers, is 3340-049A. This is, 49B. It supersedes A. Apologize. This is the B directive. Like I said, this is actually released back in January of 2026, and it supersedes the previous directive, which I think was back in 2018. I read a few articles here, but they actually don't include all the information. So I went ahead and just pulled the memo, pulled the directive, and kind of went through it. So we're going to go through the actual directive as well as the case law that kind of cemented this and how the U.S. stacks up against this. So if you didn't know, the CBP, the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, they essentially govern about 100 miles around the U.S. territory. So if you're within 100 miles, which most people are, 2/3 of the population live within this 100-mile radius, obviously the coast living and all that. So it applies to a lot of people. It also applies to everyone flying, traveling on boat, or driving across borders. So it applies to entering and exiting. So this is not just something that TSA or the Border Patrol folks will get you on. This is literally a good chunk of the U.S. population plus travelers that are both U.S. citizen, residents, or visitors. On their own website, I thought this was funny. This is a border security video that I ran into regarding Australia essentially asking this dude for his passcode. He complied, and it turns out he had some dog abuse videos, and he got put in big trouble. But this is kind of what sparked my research on this topic in the first place. But yeah, let's go through what the border protection people say on their website. It says, on rare occasions, we search your electronic devices, and it includes all these electronic devices to, of course, stop bad people, drug smuggling, human smuggling, including the really bad stuff. And essentially it's saying like, hey, this is part of our process, and it, in 2025, it only happened to 0.01% of people at the port that had their electronic devices searched. So very low amount according to their own statistics. However, 0.01% of a ton of people traveling and encountering is still quite a bit of people. So on the website says this, you have to kind of dig into the website to eventually get to this memo. When you get to this memo, you have to go back and read the directive. Once you read the directive, then you get the full detail and breakdown of what's actually going on. So we read this, which is on their website. Pretty much says, hey, we're doing this because, national security matters. We're trying to stop all this stuff. We're also trying to restrict, we'll catch people on bad visas and trying to steal intellectual property and a bunch of other reasons. Obviously, all good reasons on paper. But then we start jumping into the policy. And let's jump into some details here. This applies only to these folks, the CBP people. It does not apply to the people that are part of ICE. So Immigration, Customs Enforcement, and Homeland Security essentially have their own policy, which this does not apply to. There's some definitions here. One of the things I thought was interesting is that if we look at this article here, it does provide the exact same definition of what electronic device is, which is computers, tablets, disks, drives, tapes, flash drives, SIM cards, GPS systems, unmanned aircrafts, vehicle information systems, smartwatches, mobile phones, and any other communication devices, cameras, music, and media players. So pretty much everything that's digital that has data on it. It does clarify that if you look at the 2018 policy, flash drives, SIM cards, GPS, and unmanned aircraft, drones, and vehicle information systems or smartwatches were not included in that. So there's already an expansion of what is considered an electronic device. If you jump back into the directive here, it classifies two types of searches, a basic search and an advanced search. What's crazy is that a basic search is defined as an officer of the CBP going through your device, asking you to unlock your passcode, and note that it can be done with or without suspicion. So this is in their actual policy. It can be done with or without suspicion, subject to requirements and limitation provided them by applicable law. So there is no restrictions on basic searches. So they can be at a border. They can ask you, hey, unlock your device. We're gonna go through it, and this is considered quote unquote routine as part of their process in letting you in or out of the country, which I think is just wild. If you didn't know your phone can be searched, you do now. So this is something that you should definitely be aware about. Advanced searches, this requires kind of a higher level of supervision. This allows them to go deeper into your device. So not just ask you to unlock it, but they actually can use external tools to either copy or analyze your electronic devices. And it goes into details on what that means. But essentially, they can try to overcome encryption, bypass passwords, translate content, view files, external drives, etc., including if your phone is dead. So if you present them a phone that is dead at the basic search, and they have suspicion, and they escalate, and they end up conducting what's called an advanced search, they actually can take your device for a limited amount of time to perform an advanced search. There's a bunch of retention policies and when the information has to be deleted. There's details on that. To sum it up, they pretty much have about 5 days to go through your device if warranted, and then there's kind of escalation periods. So I think it says it right here. Detention beyond 5 days requires supervisor approval, and then beyond 15 days requires higher level approval. And then there is retention, which essentially requires probable cause and otherwise must delete all your data within 21 days. So if you do participate in an advanced search, either through your own participation or not, they have to delete the data after a certain point. What I thought was crazy is that, or interesting, was that they could only really access the local storage of that device. They cannot look at your cloud data. So the officer may ask you to disable the Wi-Fi, turn on airplane mode or disable Bluetooth in order to conduct the actual basic search. They cannot access stuff that would otherwise not be stored because it's being provided through cloud service. And in some scenarios, they will actually themselves disable network connectivity in order to, not violate this policy. And again, this is the crazy part. They can do it with or without suspicion. And then there's a bunch of technicalities here on if the information is privileged, such as attorney-client, or if it's also related to journalism, I believe. Yeah, attorney-client privileged journalism content, medical files, and commercial data. They have exemptions and they have a policy on how to do that, including a bunch of due process for those kind of informations. It's not like they can't lay hands on it. It's like they have to follow a certain order of operations in order to get access to it. Then they have a specific section regarding passcodes. And this, if you're under suspicion and they think you did something bad and they already have you on their radar and they ask you for your passcode, cool, makes sense. However, this allows a basic search to end up forcing a traveler to be obligated to present their device and also their passcode, encryption, or other security mechanisms. And they will request, quote unquote, the individual's assistance when presenting the electronic device, which I think is just wild. This kind of straight up violates privacy without a warrant or suspicion or any of the stuff that we believe are true in the US court systems for due process. And then it also says, if we're doing an advanced search, we might end up using the passcodes provided to do more research and get into the device essentially a little bit more in detail. Here's the 5 calendar days in case that they need approval for detention. There's a bunch of people listed here that have the ability to kind of do that, and then there's additional levels of compliance requirements if they do take your stuff. So let's say you give them a device that's dead, they can potentially hold that device for a certain amount of days while they get into it to perform an advanced search. Or if they have suspicion that you're blocking or hiding something, they can escalate that to an advanced search and then copy the data off and then analyze the data for a certain amount of time before they have to delete it. And in all scenarios, they require some sort of documentation, which I guess is the bare minimum for these kind of matters in the first place. There's a lot of other stuff here in details regarding audits and privacy and all that stuff. It's for it being such a violating policy, it's only this many pages, and this in PDF documents is 14 pages. This memo just kind of affirms it, and it's, if you didn't know that your data can be searched, you now do. The key takeaways: it's only for the port of entry people, not ICE and not HSI, which is Homeland Security. This is the case I was talking about earlier that essentially cemented this. This is the U.S. versus Belmonte Cardozo case. This is the summary of it. To be fair, it's a positive story for the directive, right? Essentially, a person traveling to the United States from Bolivia was subject to an inspection by the CBP people in Washington Dulles International Airport. The officer requested it to unlock the 2 iPhones, which he did, which he has to comply according to their new directive. Well, to be fair, to an existing directive that is now expanded. Within 2 minutes, they get access to the photo gallery, found some hidden folders, and discovered bad stuff with underage people, which was crazy. Subsequently, he was arrested and eventually indicted by a federal grand jury in the District Court of Eastern District of Virginia on multiple counts of bad stuff. He ended up actually entered a conditional guilty plea on all counts, preserving his right to appeal to suppressing ruling, and he was sentenced to 18 years and 25 years of supervised release. And then the U.S. Court of Appeals on the 4th Circuit reviewed whether the manual searches on his cell phones were considered routine. Routine is kind of defined as that basic search we saw in the official document. As a result of it being considered routine, it was exempt from individualized suspicion under the 4th Amendment, which protects your rights from warrantless searches and seizures, and essentially upheld that the manual search on the cell phones by Border Patrol people are routine and do not require an individualized suspicion, which are distinguished differently from forensic searches. And this article kind of goes into detail, and I'll have all of this down in the description for people to read if they're very curious. This pretty much says that, here's the article. Yeah, here's the article. There's a breakdown down here specifically regarding why it's different. So the Court of Appeal essentially said manual searches are a person doing it, not a machine. Manual searches breadth depends on the officer's time and energy, while forensic searches are comprehensive. Manual searches only reveals what user can typically access, while forensic searches can go essentially deeper. Manual searches are subject to an officer's fading memory or imperfect notes. While a 2-minute search is indeed less invasive than a forensic search, it still doesn't take the fact that technically the privacy part was violated. And as you can see up here, there's been several previous court casings, especially during arrests, where cell phones did not apply, whether Border Patrol must consider non-routine. Well, cell phones are essentially considered non-routine searches, and forensic device search at the border require additional warrants. So there's been a few different case laws in the past saying, this is a no-no. Electronic devices require some form of oversight. A new directive came out, and immediately in 2026 in July, the Court of Appeals essentially pushed that out the window. So pretty wild. I'll link these articles down below. I wanted to see how the US stacks up to other countries. So I went ahead and pulled some statistics here, or some information regarding other countries. Hong Kong has one of the most expansive digital search regimens amongst travelers. and it's tied to Hong Kong's national security law. Not surprising. Surprising to me was New Zealand, and obviously we talked about Australia. Australia also has very extensive search your phone policies. New Zealand has a fine of 2,800 US or 5,000 New Zealand. The United States has one now, obviously, and they warn that Russia, yeah, you have essentially little data privacy while there's no official ruling. Canada also has examined your personal devices under the Customs Act. You are required to provide passwords when asked. And again, same as the US, they're typically required to disable network access, similar to the US new directive. And Australia, again, having a good track record of examining electronic devices at the border. So what can you do? There's a website called EFF. If you're not familiar with it, it's the Electronic Frontier Foundation. They are very big on data privacy. They go into detail on all this case law, as well as what to do before your trip. This is just kind of the high-level summary of this. There's even more kind of articles nested within this, and I'll link both below. To sum up, since this video is getting kind of long, the quick summary of it all is: before you travel, decide whether your device that you're taking should or should not be taken in the first place. Back up your most important data in case of seizure, and who knows what happens after the seizure. Obviously, reset your passwords. If you are asked to provide passwords, get all that information you can. They cannot deny you entry if you're trying to come to the US. However, they can make your life very difficult in the process of doing so. And again, if you're refusing stuff on your device, they can just take your device and apply for an advanced search due to advanced level of suspicion. You're right, at the border is essentially is not a constitution free zone. However, the border powers at B are increased, and freedom of speech, association, press, and all that stuff, while not completely removed, are severely diminished because of these kind of policies in place. And again, this foundation and a few other foundations are actively trying to fight it. And this is a pretty long article regarding details about what to do on your trip, minimize the personal data, shift stuff to cloud storage, encrypt your stuff at rest, make sure that your information is using strong passwords, power off your devices, although this won't necessarily stop them from doing that. It might deter them from doing it. Don't rely on biometrics, because they can, again, ask that information off of you. There's like password managers, which help you from being forced to provide access to information, and so on and so on. And there's places where you can actually report this to both your government as well as appealing bodies that are currently fighting this battle to reduce the power of the Border Patrol agencies to essentially violate both US and non-US people entering and exiting the United States. So yeah, you can see all along this article. There's actually pretty good details on this article. And then here's kind of the quick summary on what you should do. Facts, some links of some case law, as well as how to file complaints with different forms of agencies. So yeah, that was a pretty lengthy video, more than I expected. To summarize, if you're taking your phone, note that it can be searched and you have very little say about it. They don't need suspicion, they don't need your permission, they don't need a warrant. It's pretty wild to me. All you can really do is be prepared, and if you're interested in fighting the ruling and the directives and this violation of privacy in the United States, there's plenty of links in the description that will let you fill out some forms to contact the people that may be in charge of these policies. So yeah, a non-AI video today. Thank you guys for tuning in. I'll record another video tomorrow. So subscribe and like the video.